In this tutorial, we are going to be looking at the endocrinology. Notice that the word endocrinology is a combination of two words, which is endocrine and then logy. And the word logy simply means study. Therefore, when we combine the two words together, endocrinology is simply the study of hormones and how they work in our body. So, but first of all, what is hormone? Here we have hormone. What is hormone? Hormones, they are like chemical messengers produced by glands in our body that helps to regulate various bodily functions. And what are those functions? Hormones help to regulate functions like the growth, development, metabolism, and things like reproductive process. So feel free to pause the video and write everything down. So next thing I need you to understand is that think of hormone like body messenger. And we said this hormone, they are being produced by the endocrine gland. So example of the endocrine, we can have something like the thyroid. Thyroid, that's number one. And we have the pancreas. So what does the pancreas produce? The pancreas produces two hormones. The first hormone is what we call the glucagon. And second hormone is insulin. And we said the insulin is being produced by beta cells, while glucagon is being produced by the alpha cells. And next thing which you really need to understand is that this hormone, they travel into the bloodstream, meaning that when this gland produces hormone, the next step they take is for them to travel into the bloodstream. And when they do that in order to deliver a message to what? From bloodstream, let's take this at step number one. Step number two, they will pass into the bloodstream. And let's say these are the hormones. From bloodstream, they deliver the message into our cells. And we take an example with insulin. What does insulin do to our body? We said insulin is a hormone. It actually sends a signal to absorb glucose from the bloodstream. Meaning that when the pancreas produces insulin, insulin sends a signal in order for our cells to take in glucose inside. For example, when we have elevated level of glucose, let's say in the extracellular space, right? So insulin have to come into the circulation. And notice that without glucose inside of our cell, if we don't have glucose here, we can't survive. So let's assume this is glucose. When insulin came in here, it served or is more like a key which open this open the cells. And when it open these cells, the glucose can find their way into the cell. So that is a very brief explanation of how the hormones and the neighboring glands actually work. Let's dive back into our topic of discussion, which is the endocrinology. So that is what we call the hypothalamic pituitary endocrine axis. So in this case, we can define it by saying the hypothalamic pituitary and the endocrine, they simply communicate through a complex feedback loop, often refers to the hypothalamic, pituitary, and the endocrine. Let's write it down. Okay, let's put it here. Hypothalamic, pituitary, endocrine axis. So what I'm trying to explain here is this. I want us to look at how the hypothalamus, which is more like the master gland on top, communicate with the pituitary, and from the pituitary, and how it descends and sends signals into the other part of the body. And notice that this is a roughly sketch of human brain. Inside of the human brain, what we have on top, which is here, we have what we call the hypothalamus. And below or beneath it, we have the pituitary gland. And here, which is number one, here we have the number two, and here we have the third one, which is the blood vessels. So now let's look at step by step how these organs work. First of all, the hypothalamus, what it does, it actually detects a signal. It detects if there is maybe a change in the internal body. What sort of changes? Those changes can be temperature, hunger, or even stress. We can have changes like what? We said the changes can be temperature. It can also be hunger and even stress. And remember, whatever that is being produced from the pituitary and the hypothalamus, when it moves into our blood vessels, the next thing it will enter is into our cells. And what happens when it gets into the cells? That is, it delivers a message and tells the cell what to do. So the next step, the first step is detecting a signal. What sort of a signal? We said it can be temperature, hunger, or even stress. So the hypothalamus will simply release hormone. Remember, this is the hypothalamus on top. And let's assume that we have some hormone inside of this hypothalamus. It will release the hormone down into the pituitary. So when it does that, the hormone can either be stimulatory or inhibitory. Stimulatory, they simply stimulate and tell maybe part of the body or the cell to perform an action. And the inhibitory, actually, it inhibits, as the name suggests. Inhibition is more like blocking. So let's put it down. Hormones can either be stimulatory or inhibitory. So what is the example of stimulatory hormone? We can have things like growth hormone releasing hormone and thyroid releasing hormone. What about this inhibitory? Those ones that block an action. We have things like somatostatin, and the next one we have something like dopamine. Notice that the somatostatin is what we call the universal inhibitor, and dopamine is also an inhibitor, which we are going to look at that maybe in our next video. So the next step, we see the first step is the detection of signal. Second step is a secretion of hormone from the hypothalamus down into the pituitary. The next step is what? The pituitary gland, it simply receives signals from the pituitary and respond by releasing the hormone that stimulates the endocrine gland. E.g., we have the thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, let's take an example like to say the hormone have been moved down from the hypothalamus down into the pituitary. We take an example with one hormone, which we call TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. The thyroid stimulating hormone, notice that it will move into our bloodstream. So at this point, we have the endocrine gland, which will receive signals from the pituitary gland and respond by releasing hormone down into the thyroid hormone. So what happens at this point? Hormones travel to their target cell. The moment it finds itself inside the bloodstream, it's going to move into the target cells. So the hormone tells the cell what to do, and the target cell responds by doing what the hormone tells it to do. So meaning that when this hormone passes in here, it will command the cell to perform some certain action. And the cell actually, it will respond back to the hormone by doing what the hormone wanted to do. And we take an example with insulin from the pancreas and tells that what it does, it tells the cell to absorb glucose which is found outside of the cell. So this is it for this problem. I hope you find it helpful. If you do, please don't forget to click on the subscribe button. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Before I forget, notice that this is just a brief explanation of the endocrinology, or let me say a basic explanation. In our next video, in details, we are going to be looking at some hormones like the growth hormone releasing hormone individually, the somatostatin, which we said is the universal inhibitor, and we have the thyroid releasing hormone, luteinizing hormone, and we have the follicle stimulating hormone, etc., etc. Thank you. In this tutorial,